Trudy sitting in for Elias. You are probably aware that a 17-year-old here in Montreal has been charged with terror-related offenses. The Mounties alleging he had pledged allegiance to the Islamic State, was planning to acquire a weapon in order to carry out an attack, also indicating that he will be facing an additional charge of assaulting a police officer while he was being handcuffed after arrest. The larger question, though, is what is going on with young people here in Montreal and beyond, because there is a worry that we are seeing an upswing in radicalization, and that the teenagers, well, this one was 17 years old. We have seen other cases involving even younger teens. Here to help us learn more is Dr. Cécile Rousseau, a professor at McGill University's Division of Social and Cultural Psychiatry. She holds a Canada Research Chair in the Prevention of Violent Radicalization, and in fact deals with de-radicalization. Dr. Rousseau, welcome to CJ 8800.
Good morning.
Paint the portrait for us of what you're seeing in Montreal right now in terms of radicalization. Are we seeing an upswing? Is the nature of the radicalization the same, or is it evolving?
Yes, it's a good question. Let's take a North American perspective. So it is a world problem, but it is clearly a North American problem with an upswing, strong, sharp, of radicalization in the United States and in Canada. We have epidemiological research in Alberta, Ontario, and Quebec, and the trend is the same. One of the most worrisome aspects is that it affects younger and younger adolescents. So now throughout Canada, we have kids 12, 13, 14, either glorifying violence or adhering, and if very young, to different forms or buying in different forms of extremism, including masculinism, extreme right, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, anti-refugee and anti-immigrant rhetoric, and religious extremism is part of those. So you see there's a global trend. And of course, all these forms of extremism and the glorification of violence is very worrisome.
Well, we've been talking here in Quebec about both radicalization of young Muslims who have been convinced to go overseas and fight, to engage in jihad, for example, or to engage in activities here. We have the arrests of those Canadian Forces members who were based in Quebec. They were, I think, more right-wing. Is there any one philosophy that seems to be predominating now? Right, left, radical right, anti-Semitic?
I would say we have more of the global trend is more extreme right. Extreme right Nazi ideology is becoming increasingly popular. Interestingly enough, and that's the work of an Ontario professor, I would say that the anti-Muslim and anti-Palestinian rhetoric is stronger than the anti-Semitic one, although both are important and, of course, of concern. It's the whole idea of how do we live together, how do we provide young people with hope, and with the idea that we can live together even if we disagree, and that the existence of the other doesn't challenge our own. So you see, this is an important issue because those form of extremism and glorification of the violence in the army, they're young people too, and in religious extremism are usually, all of them are linked to grievances. So impression that life and our society are unfair, and there's no democratic solution to get one voice heard and changing in the direction, even if we disagree in the way as things need to be changed. And this is, I think, the challenges for school and for our society is how can we contain discontent and diverging voices, because this is needed if we want to avoid violence. So you see, it's an important problem, but it's not just for security forces to solve, because punishing despair just makes it worse. So security is needed, but is not enough. The most important thing is, how do we contain these grievances, and how do we become a society where people feel they can be heard and young people feel there is hope?
Are there any conditions that make certain kids more prone to becoming radicalized?
Absolutely. So, being unhappy and being vulnerable are those. So how do you are unhappy? Being bullied at school is a major factor. Having disrupted a violent or sad home, so family factors are major. School factors, not being able to perform, having the impression that you will not make it. So school performance, being or not accepted by peers, falling in love, how adolescents are. All of these are important. So if they are grievances, if they are trauma in people under 18, and we have now an upsurge in people under 18 becoming violent, it's very much in our clientele linked to stress-related disorder. Complex PTSD, adjustment disorder. It means life hurts. The good news is, if we address that and we follow up these kids for years, sometime they become better and they regain hope, sense of purpose, and want to integrate our society. So we can heal and help those kids. We need to address the fact that life hurts. Very often schools are afraid and they tend to expel the kids, or we arrest them, which is okay because we need to stop the violence. But if you don't provide help and you increase the distress and the despair, it's a time bomb.
I'm glad that you brought up that there is hope for these kids, because I think a lot of just ordinary folks are very skeptical about de-radicalization programs, that they figure once a person, has pledged allegiance to ISIS and is willing to be violent in the pursuit of political or religious goals, there's no going back. But you're saying if you can get a hold of them, you have a good chance of getting them to reconsider.
Absolutely. This is really our experience, and it addresses also people who are returning from ISIS. So the outcome is very good if people have a space to be heard, to be held, to reintegrate. They have a future for themselves, for the kids, or for other people around them. And it leads to very good outcome. Trying to make people change their mind is not efficacious. And in that sense, people who say we don't believe in DRAD, they're partially right, because if you're distressed and think of something adamantly, for example, remember the anti-vax during the pandemic, right? Mm-hmm. Calling them names are stupid, egoistic, and so on, criminals, did not make them change their mind. What could, and we work in marginalized neighborhood on Montreal in that, respectful listening, trying to understand what their predicament is, this is helpful. And so it's the idea is, if we face very young people, even if we give very severe judicial sentence, they will be out and part of our society for a very long time. For them and for us, we need to consider what's the best outcome and understand the distress beneath the rage. If we do that, our data show that it works.
Dr. Cécile Rousseau, thank you very much for the interview. Very illuminating.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Dr. Rousseau, by the way, leads a special team that treats young extremists. It has treated 150 new extremist patients in the past year, double the caseload referred to years ago. That is worrisome.